Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us Dr. Parthasarathi Shome, who was till recently chairman of Tax Administration Reforms Commission, which has given 4 reports in the last 1 year, far-reaching recommendations on how to overhaul India's tax administration. One of the key reforms which is still pending, and we will discuss with Dr. Shome on some of the important aspects of his report. Welcome to our show,
Thank you,
Dr. Parthasarathi Shome. Now, you've given 4 reports. The last one a few months ago, before the budget, to the finance minister. And one of your key fundamental reform recommendations is that the tax department should be brought into a completely new framework of incentives and accountability. And it should be held accountable for its actions. And you've also given many other recommendations in order to bring complete transparency in the way the tax department interfaces with the taxpayer, whether it's individual or businesses, etc. Now, how do you see some of these recommendations panning out or being accepted by the government, especially considering the tax procedures has been accepted or been cited by the finance minister himself as a key driver of ease of doing business. So it dovetails into that. So how do you see all this happening, and are you hopeful that some of your recommendations will take shape?
Yeah. To begin, Venu, I think that I am hopeful because Finance Minister in his budget speech has said that the recommendations of TARC are at an advanced stage of examination and will be implemented in the financial year 2015-16. Yeah. So one has to be hopeful.
Yeah. So that's a commitment in the budget?
That's right. That's a direct commitment in the budget, and therefore I will be seeing how 2015-16 evolves. Then you are absolutely right that the central issue in the tax administration is how to empower the staff and at the same time make the staff accountable. Yeah. Now, in our country, it is a good thing is that there is a certain degree or a very advanced amount of job security. Yeah. But the accountability should be also in terms of not just security, but to reflect what are the kinds of insurance that the tax administration imparts to the taxpayer. Yeah. So the tax administration today, the officer can generate any number of disputes and move on to the next job. Yeah. Or even before disputes, any amount of demand and move to the next job. Now, in most reformed or reforming tax administrations, the tax administrator is accountable for the demand that he or she has raised, and any dispute that has been raised sort of carries on with the tax administrator till it is resolved. Okay. So the result, since here there is no accountability.
If he is shifted to some other ministry, yeah, his decision should follow him until.
Absolutely, he should be in the loop. He should be following up on what has happened and how this is closed or not closed and why. And therefore, in other administrations, you find that disputes are simply almost non-existent. Maybe 7, 8, 9, 15, 16 a year in advanced countries.
And in India?
In India, we have thousands every year. In fact, if you really look at the graph on per year and the stock of graph, ours is literally out of the map. Out of the graph of cross-section of tax administrations. Yeah, so we are really, in fact,
is it because Dr. Shome, is it because honest tax officers are forced to, or they feel compelled to give maximum penalty or treat the taxpayer in the harshest possible manner for fear that in future they might be held accountable by the CAG or by the Central Vigilance Commission for having been lenient? I mean, this is one complaint that I keep hearing.
Yeah, no, that is an explanation, but that is not justified because I don't think the escape route for a tax officer should be to demand something that is not correct, irrational and unfair on the taxpayer. That is the first thing. Second, the CAG's view, as far as I know, is that they have never really forced the tax administration to follow exactly what they have said. Yet that boards have said that as soon as the CAG raises an objection, even if the assessing officer disagrees with that objection, he or she has to issue what is called a protective demand. That protects the department. But that is totally superfluous. If the department disagrees with the CAG, it should be the department's responsibility to object to CAG. And if the CAG still says that no, we disagree with you, then they can go to PAC, Parliamentary Committee on the matter, and then they can resolve it there. And that used to be the practice, let's say 15, 20 years ago. One of the members of TARC, who was chairman of CBEC, Mr. Zucchi, he kept on saying that in my time I spent hours with CAG, I spent hours in PAC to explain what we have done is right. Why have they introduced this protective demand institution? And therefore, those kinds of things can be removed, and the assessing officer should be empowered to say, you are speaking for the department and you take your right decision and do it. But today, on the one hand, there is no accountability. On the other hand, because of fear of vigilance, under guidance of the board, they have to issue protective demand. So it's really a double-edged sword.
And fundamentally, Dr. Shome, do you agree that the tax administration or tax officers should be, at the end of the day, judged more by how they have managed to expand the tax base rather than how many people they have penalized or caught?
Or how much revenue they've collected blindly.
That's what I mean when they expand the tax base. Because you said that India's tax base is not expanded for 10 years?
Yes. If you look at the number of individual income tax payers.
And these 10 years, we've seen 8% average GDP growth?
Yes.
How do you reconcile the two?
That is what we have a full chapter on how to expand the tax base and the taxpayer base. Now, in about 2006-07, the total number of taxpayers were filing were about, we reached 3.5 crore. And we are still around that number. Whereas in the previous decade, it came up from about 1.7, 1.8 crore to 2.6 crore. So,
so what do you attribute this to?
Well, in that decade...
And you have a recommendation in your report in regard to this also?
Yes. It's very detailed, step by step, how to do it, etc. But the main thing is, in the expanding sectors, there has been no real thrust in including the number of taxpayers. It seems that... for example, in the burgeoning services sectors, I mean, if you look around...
Or the self-employed.
Or the self-employed, there are I don't want to mention particular services because it will be taken as I'm opposed to certain service sectors. But there are lots of newly emerging service sectors with urbanites and even rural, small...
Contractors, doctors, lawyers, architects.
Not just that. If you look, there are new taxi services, there are new... They may be giving you the same... and all the others, the professions that you mentioned, you go, they say, do you want a bill or not? So these are practices that are very easy. Or it is not just them. If we are really biting the bullet, we have to really see around ourselves what is happening in the in certain large sectors, certain large and strong people. Are they willing to take the lead and change this? And you can expand the taxpayer base in terms of numbers and the tax base in terms of what is coming into the base for taxation. And so in that sense, the wealth tax, for example, collected only 800 to 900 crores a year. Can you imagine in the country? So it was not being, and so the very small middle class or some groups in certain ethnic groups I found, they regularly and honestly filed wealth tax, but most people obviously didn't, because how can you collect just 800, 900 crores?
Tell me, you said Finance Minister Arun Jaitley gave a specific commitment that he will look at some of the key recommendations of your report for implementation in 2015-16 FY. So, have you did your committee have a discussion with the Finance Minister or his key officials and prioritize as to what are the 2-3 things that can be done immediately in the coming year?
Yeah, I must say that at the beginning, at the end of the first report, the Commission had a very long and nice meeting with the Finance Minister. He was relatively new at that time.
Yeah.
And
this was must have been June, July last year.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think he found the recommendations, as I explained, and other members also explained. He found them very interesting. I know that tax administration reform was the primary thing on his mind at that time in the Ministry of Finance. He had other briefs and portfolios, of course. And subsequently also, he mentioned to me that he is holding meetings with the Revenue Department and the tax departments to move forward in the recommendations. Also, I must say that the Prime Minister's office has been very keen to look at the recommendations, and they have all put together and indicated what are the things we can do immediately. Accordingly, we have provided, the Commission has provided them 2 or 3 times what are the things that they can move forward with. So they have that guidance from us.
Tell me, one of the things that the Finance Minister has announced in this budget is, it's interesting that any payment above 20,000 rupees, especially for buying houses, real estate sector, has to be by check. Now, do you think this is a very key instrument by which you could really attack black money and bring so many more taxpayers in the real estate sector?
No, I think that that's what I said. You know, I recently wrote and said this is a budget with a lot of sense and sensibility.
Yeah.
But in italics, in short, I said, but the issue is delivery. So, do we have the instruments to really deliver these good and high thoughts? And I totally agree with the thoughts, but I really think, like the administration reform issue, in all of these matters, even in particular as we go down the levels of government, I think these challenges lie primarily today in the lower levels of government, where you are dealing with these checks and all these kinds of things. And so you can have a little service tax and say that you have to pay 1% tax, or you can, income tax, 1% tax withholding by the purchaser, and the seller gets 1% less. And then as you go down, when you are really doing all these other payments, etc., how are they done? And I therefore think it is not just at the central government level, but it accumulates like an iceberg.
So you have to have the entire, all the state administration to also to chip in and make it work. So we'll take a small break here. Please don't go away and keep watching RSTV. Welcome back to State of the Economy. So Dr. Parthasarathi Shome, you were talking about transforming the tax department. That's one of your key recommendations, is to make the tax department totally accountable and transparent and give it autonomy and incentives to perform as an autonomous service provider to the customer. So the taxpayer should be treated like a customer, right? So now, how do you see this framework getting internalized by the tax department? I'm sure they would require retraining. A whole lot of this is a process. This can't be an event, right?
Yes, absolutely. So indeed, in our reports, the first chapter of the first report was customer focus, because we felt that when the taxpayer is facing the building, coming into Aikar Bhavan or wherever,
they're very scared of the building.
Very scared of the building. And from inside, you are looking at the person, the potential taxpayer, who needs help. So that is your customer. And just like entering, a store to buy a fridge or a TV, you help the customer. So that is why most countries are now using the word customer and stakeholder rather than taxpayer. And I was surprised that those phrases are not even recognized in India. So we started with that chapter.
In fact, in India, the taxpayer often doesn't want to meet the tax collector.
That's right.
And they do it through a chartered accountant.
Exactly. Whereas it is too common in reformed tax administrations for a taxpayer to just walk in or call in. They have so many call centers. They're called customer call centers or CCCs. And so, therefore, we have suggested several steps. One, for example, is that refunds are held up for taxpayers again for no reason. Particular reason is given, etc. So we suggested have a vertical separately for refunds, and that should be protected. It should not be mingled, co-mingled with the revenue collection.
So what are you saying, that the decision to give timely refund should not depend on whether enough tax is being collected. Otherwise, they keep delaying it if not enough tax is being collected.
It is well known that in the last quarter, tax refunds become very tight. To meet the revenue goal.
Why should it become tight in the last quarter?
Exactly. So that you treat it as a
you demerge the refund department.
Yes, we suggested that you separate it out. Second...
And how do you plan to give autonomy?
Yes.
Especially at the state level?
Yeah. At the state level. Meaning the
tax collectors at the state level.
State level, yeah.
Because India is about 24 states to collect taxes.
No, one is that the central government itself has offices all over the states. Then the central government's tax departments have to be given the autonomy. The second is then at the state government level, now that we will have GST, how do you give the autonomy to them, each of them? Now that is a different scale of problem. Because we are a fiscal federal state. So the center cannot intervene and say to the states, you run your tax administrations this way.
No, but IT department has its people in the states, right?
And no, not only that, but they are also getting more technical assistance in tax administration at the state level directly from multilateral organizations, which at the central level we don't get or we don't ask for. So I think, but the main thing is at the central government level to empower the staff at the state level. But for that, it is absolutely important to give guidance from the boards so that at the state level, officers do not do their own thing in different ways. So for the same problem, same issue, today we have different officers giving different opinions. And so different taxpayers for the same issue are being treated differently. And that is because at the board level, there are not enough guidances. And even when there are guidances, there's always, not always, but mainly a little caveat saying that however under certain circumstances, etc. Whereas in other tax administrations, you don't find that. So the other thing for customer focus is
accountability, no?
Before accountability, I would say even consultation. In most tax administration, before you really introduce a major change, you have a whole process, open process of discussion with taxpayers and both companies and individuals, in particular companies, and then you bring it. And if you do not do that, but I must say, from looking at hearing and seeing some reports, I think in the case of international taxation, the officials in charge of international taxation are having regular discussions with taxpayers and tax bodies and research bodies. So they are now recognizing the need and sort of usefulness of discussions. So at least in a very small sense, they do have they are having discussions.
So you're essentially suggesting that a lot of retraining needs to be done of and guidance from the top. And using instruments in the right way. Like we had this big debate over GAR, General Anti-Avoidance Rules. And it was thought that GAR itself was very draconian, but now we realize that GAR itself is not draconian. It's used by the European countries with a lot of safeguards. They have to get a court order before using GAR. It's the fact that our tax administration, our tax officers are not trained enough to use GAR. That's the problem, it seems, right? The mindset is the problem.
And absolutely. And you can take the cue about that from the way the transfer pricing adjustments have been implemented. The transfer pricing is simply the price between two associated enterprises and is it the right price or not. Now in India, the number of adjustments made on transfer pricing far exceed the total number of adjustments made in most advanced countries today. So why? Because I feel it is really not the issue of the transfer pricing officers or the assessment officers, but they have to be given intensive training. And after that training, they have to be put in that role for some time, 3-4 years, to really understand and develop the skill. Whereas here, sometimes I do know they take the training for 2-3 weeks, come back and then they are transferred. And someone who's doing that job doesn't have any training.
Is that why we losing, the department is losing so many cases at the High Court level, transfer pricing cases against
transfer pricing,
against foreign companies? Yeah.
Then these demands that they make, the protective demands, and they are losing. So
and is that why the finance minister has given a commitment that cases where they lose very badly at the High Court level, the tax department should not go in appeal
the same kind of
if they find that they have a bad case. Right?
They have a bad case, or they should not appeal similar cases. In fact, we have recommended in TARC that they should withdraw similar cases that are pending. And say they should not. So there are many areas that you can do this. That? Yes, we have recommended that you should withdraw the cases. And similarly, we've said that, you look at the whole these disputes that are lagging behind. You take a stock of the disputes and you reduce the disputes by half in 1 year, because so many of them are simply, you can take them away from your books. They simply add the number of disputes.
From a customer point of view, Dr. Shome, there is a constant complaint from salaried class that they get harassed by the tax department, whereas they are the easiest picks. I mean, they pay tax at source. I mean, the organization deduct tax, and then they just file the returns and do the whatever needful. So, whereas the tax administration's efforts are focused on the salaried class, on the other hand, you have a whole area of self-employed, army of self-employed people who are not on the tax radar at all, which is why you say for the last 10 years, the number of taxpayers have stagnated at 3.5 crores, 35 million. Now, how do you expand the tax base? Do you think GST or this new black money, the instrument where anything above 30,000 rupees should be paid by check for real estate transactions, or such instruments can bring more people into the tax net? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, certainly the black money bill, if it is passed, then I think it will willy-nilly bring in more people into the tax net, but it will not bring certainly everyone. It will be, but it will make a dent on tax evasion, certainly. Ultimately, it is the institutions that are generating black money where we have to do it, not just the tax. Black money is non-tax paid cash money. So, you have to really see where the cash is being generated and take a look at those sectors and how those sectors operate. But you cannot therefore just say that, okay, we will sort of go from the tax side only and see that the
or
tax
from
is paid.
Attack it from the expenditure side.
Expenditure side also. And so, that is the first thing that you have to do. But the issue is that it is not just the salaried class. I must say that the central processing center that has been set up in Bangalore, or the central processing center for TDS, tax reduction at source, that has been set up in Vaishali, they are doing excellent work. I mean, it is a PPP, because there are some private sector IT companies that have joined in with the public sector to the process returns. And those who have sort of simple sources of return like salary and interest, by and large are getting their refunds on a regular basis and so on.
So that is another complaint which comes from the salaried class. Refunds get delayed.
Refunds get
delayed. They get timed according to the tax department's whims and fancies.
Not whims and fancies, because some of the checks and balances between the, say, the assessing officer in the field to whom you are responsible and the CPC in Bangalore, that may not be fully coordinated. So the information in CPC that TDS has been done for you is not showing up necessarily on the assessing officer. So there's a
mismatch. Okay, I want to ask you, as an economist, a very critical question. You rightly said that attacking black money has to be at the point of generation. Now, this announcement made in the budget that anything above 20,000 rupees in the real estate, for buying housing or houses in the real estate sector has to be by check. Now, this seems to be attacking black money at the expenditure level. Somebody goes, some tier 2 town person goes with 20 lakh rupees to buy a one-room house whose income itself is cash generated, and he pays cash for housing. Some self-employed, it could be a truck repair shop owner. Now, if you start attacking on the expenditure side, will you in the short run kill economic activity? Will you sort of scare them? Will the tax department end up scaring this whole lot of people who earn small money in cash, and they also participate in the economy in a big way, right? So how will this pan out?
Very good question. I think that it may be worthwhile a little dip in the economy to get maximum gains in the medium term. However, this could work, as I'm saying, a little dip and a huge gain for society and economy as a whole in the medium term. But you have to make, that's what I mean by where it is generated and how, you have to make opening bank accounts where you need a check.
You get them into the net,
Yeah, but you have to make it easy. Even today you go and try to open a bank account, a person who is going to spend 30,000 rupees, see how difficult, if not impossible, it is.
Many of these guys who pay by cash, they probably don't even have a bank account.
They don't, and it is not just because they don't want to. Many of them want to, but we have not. Whoever may say whatever, but it is not feasible for these vast layers of our society to access institutions. They will not even be given importance.
So we have to fix that first, which is a gargantuan task.
That is what I mean. Those are the kinds of things.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shome, for talking to us. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.